The senator from Oklahoma.
And Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that Chaya Kaufman, who is a detailee in the Environment and Public Works Committee from the U.S. Department of Transportation, have floor privileges for the duration of consideration of H.R. 22, the underlying vehicle for the highway bill.
Without objection.
Well, Mr. President, this is, we're going to be moving to the highway bill. In fact, we're going to have the motion to proceed today at 2:15. And I think it's important that people realize the significance of this. You know, we do a lot of things around here that are not really critical. There are some things that are. You go back and read the Constitution sometime when you have nothing else to do, and they'll say that what we're supposed to be doing here are two things: defending America and roads and bridges. That's what it says in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. So anytime you're sitting around with nothing to do, you ought to read it, and you'll realize that what we're going to do at 2:15 today is very significant. It's very significant. Passing a long-term transportation reauthorization bill has been my top priority since I resumed the office, the chairmanship of the Environment and Public Works Committee. And it's probably the second most important thing we do, second only to the defense authorization bill. Now, in the hearing, and we had a hearing, the first hearing we had in January, we had Secretary Fox, Secretary of Transportation, who is just really an outstanding secretary, and he is just as concerned about this as we are. Senator Boxer and I brought in Secretary Fox as well as the local government leaders to share the importance of ongoing federal and state partnerships in building and maintaining a modern surface infrastructure system. Since that time, my committee has put forward a bold bipartisan bill called the DRIVE Act. It really is significant. It is something that is not, it's not partisan. There's no such thing as a Democrat bridge or a Republican bridge or a Democrat road or a Republican road. And so I have to say this though, historically, the Republicans have been recognized as the kind of leading in this area. It was way back in the very first one, of course, was back in Lincoln's day, but the Transcontinental Railroad was spearheaded by Lincoln. The Panama Canal was Teddy Roosevelt, and of course, the interstate highway system is President Eisenhower. President Eisenhower recognized that weakened defense and interstate commerce made our nation vulnerable to the world. He was concerned about it, and in 1952, when he first started in on this thing, he commented that it was every bit as much for defending America as it was the economy, being able to transport things around the state. In laying out the full interstate system, he envisioned it to be the physical backbone of the economy, fueling the growth of our GDP, our cities, and competitiveness, and all of that. This vision and certainty maximize the economic and mobility benefits of the system. Businesses and individuals knew that they could locate somewhere on a future interstate system and be connected to the rest, not just the rest of the country, but the rest of the world. And I'm afraid that this legacy system, which was built 50 years ago, had a design life at that time of 50 years. It was actually 60, well, close to 70 years ago. So we're beyond our warranty period right now, and we're in serious danger of eroding a half-century of investments without proper maintenance, modernization, and reconstruction. We're on borrowed time with a system that's in full need of restoration. Our national interstate system currently has a maintenance backlog of $185 billion, and that's in about 47,000 miles of interstate. And that's just to bring it back to the design it was in 1956. Maintaining Eisenhower's vision of the economic opportunity and strength in defense requires a continued partnership between the federal government and the states, which is the hallmark of the DRIVE Act. Yet, due to 33 short-term patches since 2005, I have to say this because this is significant. We should be operating on a transportation reauthorization system all the time. The last one we did was 2005. I was the author of it back in 2005. I say to the chair, that was a 5-year bill. And, and since that time, we went through some 30 different short-term extensions. And you go through a short-term extension, and it doesn't do any good. You have to have a transportation reauthorization bill in order to get all the reforms that are necessary and to have time to handle the major large problems that we have to deal with. Passing a long-term bill is crucial to many aspects of day-to-day life in America. More than 250 million vehicles and 18 billion tons valued at $17 trillion in goods traverse across the country every year. Yet every day, 20,000 miles of our highways slow below the posted speed limits or experience stop-and-go conditions. The national highway system is only 5% of the nation's total roads, but it carries 55% of all vehicle traffic and 97% of the truck-borne freight. Now, we're talking about 97% of the freight is on only 5% of the highway system. Congress just passed a 2-month extension, and now we have the responsibility to pass a long-term bill. The Highway Trust Fund currently needs $15 billion a year to maintain the current spending. Let me go over that. Back when we started out the Highway Trust Fund, that was a percentage. You know, you drive up and you pay a tax when you buy your gas. That's supposed to be taking care of the highways, and it did. I can remember when I was serving in the House, the biggest problem we had at that time was we had too much money in the Highway Trust Fund. We had more than we needed. I remember when President Clinton came in, he wanted to rob the Highway Trust Fund for all of his programs, and he got by with it for a while. That's not the problem anymore. The problem now is there's not enough money in it. We have a lot of, the situation has changed. People are not using as much fuel, and so we fall short by $15 billion a year of having the amount of money necessary today to continue today's spending levels. That's $15 billion a year. Now, this is a 6-year bill. That means about $90 billion of it is going to have to be in excess of the amount of money, revenue that's derived from the Highway Trust Fund. The DRIVE Act, and that's what we call this, the DRIVE Act will put America back on the map as the best place to do business. The DRIVE Act has several key components that position America's transportation system to support our growing economy. It prioritizes funding for core transportation formula programs to provide states and local governments with strong federal partner. It prioritizes the interstate system, the national highway system, and the bridges at risk for funding shortfalls. It creates a new multi-billion-dollar per year freight program to help states deliver projects and promote the safe and efficient transportation of goods. Targets funds for major projects in the community like this one right here. This is the Spence Bridge. This goes from from Kentucky to Ohio, and actually takes transportation also to Indiana. This is a very old bridge, and you can see that it's going to have to be replaced. These are the huge things you can't do with short-term extensions. You're going to have a major bill like the one we're having right now. And lastly, the DRIVE Act provides greater efficiency in the project delivery process, reforms that put DOT in the driver's seat during the NEPA process by requiring agencies to bring all the issues to the table, keeping it under a deadline, eliminating duplicate. You know, one of the problems you have is with the environmental requirements, they end up delaying projects, and so this bill gives exceptions. And let me say that I was very proud of Senator Boxer. You know, Senator Boxer is a very proud liberal. I'm a very proud conservative. So one of the few things we agree on is a highway bill. And the highway bill it does require some changes that allow them to go ahead and keep working in spite of some of the NEPA requirements or the environmental requirements. This gives bridge projects special consideration with new exemptions from the Section 4F, the historic property reviews for concrete and steel bridges, a new exemption from the Migratory Bird Treaty Act for bridges in serious condition. Now, sounds kind of off the wall, but one of the problems is the swallows. The swallows go in there and they block and they nest in the areas where we're supposed to be repairing bridges. Now, the swallow is not an endangered species. It's not listed, but the Migratory Bird Treaty Act does give them protection, and this waives that in the case of bridge construction. And so it also enforces greater transparency and for federal funds to show the taxpayers where the monies are being spent. And this is just a brief overview of the bill. As the DRIVE Act progresses on the floor, I intend to address the significance of each program in more detail. The most important point I must address today about the DRIVE Act is that our bill sets funding levels for the next 6 years. This is at the very least what the federal government should provide so that states, local officials, and the construction industry can gear up for the large $500 million to $2 billion major highway projects and bridge projects that we can get them off the ground. They have to get ready for it. That's what this bill does. Thousands of projects across the nation are currently at jeopardy, and construction will come to a halt unless legislation becomes a reality. Future projects like let's go back to, well, you saw already the Brent Spence Bridge in Kentucky, and there is also the $2.6 billion Mobile River Bridge in Alabama. This is right here. This right here is a projection of what it will look like. This is as it is today. This would be impossible without something like a 6-year bill. Here in D.C., the Memorial Bridge is literally crumbling into the Potomac. People don't understand what happens to these bridges, but you can just see that in our case in Oklahoma, we had a bridge over I-35, and in the year 2005, we, as a part of that bill, that legislation, we were able to repair it. In 2004, right before that took place, one of the chunks came off, just like you're seeing here, of the bridge, and actually killed a young lady who was driving under it with her 3 children. And that's how serious this is. So this is the Arlington Memorial Bridge. It's built in 1932. And it's something that has to be done with that. We'll be able to do projects like this. I think more than just the small part of the economic success enjoyed by the United States over the past 50 years has been the interstate system. But today, we literally sit at the crossroads of its future, and the solution is urgent. And this is why Senator Boxer, and I are bringing the DRIVE Act to the Senate floor as a solution that will ensure that states have the tools and the certainty to make the necessary new investments to rebuild Eisenhower's vision, to fight growing congestion, to maintain the mobility of goods and services necessary to keep the economy going. By passing the DRIVE Act, Congress will be able to pave the way for the next 50 years of American excellence in infrastructure. And I have to say this, the importance of this thing is that the only alternative is to have short-term extensions. And I'm talking about 1- and 2-month extensions, which you can't organize your labor. The cost of that, and by the way, I say this to my conservative friends, they'll be friends, and I can say this since I've been ranked as the most conservative member of this body many times, that the conservative position is not to oppose this massive highway bill that we're going to have, but to oppose the short-term extensions. It costs about 30% more for short-term extensions than it does a highway reauthorization bill. And that's why this is so important. Later on, I'm going to go over many of the other bridges and structures around that are going to have to be addressed. In the meantime, this is something that we're supposed to do, and I'll kind of end up where we started off, and that is there's no document that nobody reads anymore called the Constitution. You go back and read that, and you'll find out what we, in this body, are supposed to be doing. It's defending America, and it's providing bridges and roads. So as we progress on this, it won't be time to go into any more detail now because we have members wanting to come down and use both the Republican and the Democrat time between now and the noon hour. But at 2:15, we're going to have a motion that we'll be voting on to move to the consideration of this bill. It doesn't say you have to be for it or against it. You want to change it. If you want to have amendments, that you have to get to the bill before you can have amendments. So it would be to proceed to the bill. A motion to proceed will take place at 2:15. Now, I want to tell all of the members that are out there, if you have amendments, we're going to try to knock this thing out in 2 weeks. We're going to be down here talking about it for 2 weeks. But if you have amendments, then it'll really, if you want a chance to offer your amendments, you can offer them. But bring them down, file your amendments. If you don't do that, we'll pass a deadline and you won't be able to do it. So I encourage our members to do that. I look forward to the next 2 weeks of discussing and passing the second most significant bill that we'll consider this entire year. With that, I'll yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.